Good evening and welcome back to another episode of the Since I Was Young podcast for all things Heart of Midlothian. This evening, myself and John will be talking through the last 7 or so days in the life of Heart of Midlothian and the events and news that have emerged in that time. Obviously, starting with the news of the final agreement with Jamestown Analytics being signed and sealed and delivered. So all positive there, and obviously the involvement of Tony Bloom in that, and we'll obviously discuss his potential investment and his potential minority shareholding that could be in the not too distant future. The week, however, ended with a slight feeling of deja vu in terms of the situation on the park as we took on Celtic at Tynecastle and succumbed to a 4-1 defeat. As I say, feelings of deja vu, which we will certainly dive into as we go along. Before we do get cracked in, folks, I say it every week and I'm going to say it again. All our socials can be found in the description. Please do follow us on all the social channels that we have. Blue Sky in particular, we are starting to see a few more followers on there, which is really, really great to see. A lot of people making that jump across from the other place to the new place. So certainly, if you haven't done so, please consider doing so, and you can find us. All the handles are down in the description, and subscribe to the YouTube channel at the same time, please, because your support and feedback is massively, massively appreciated. So with the formalities out of the way, let's just jumped straight in. Obviously, as I say, the start of the week began with the news of the Jamestown Analytics deal being signed and sealed and confirmed, giving Hearts exclusive access to the data analysis or data analysts that they employ, and obviously all the algorithms that come along with that. It was one of those deals that everybody knew was coming. Obviously, they were involved in the recruitment of Neil Critchley, so it's been in use already by the club, and they've identified Critchley as the man they wanted to bring in. So we've seen already that it's been sort of tried and tested. Obviously, very early to suggest if Neil Critchley's appointment is going to be a success or not, which I'm sure we'll dive into as the months roll on under his reign. But it's nice to see that we're already utilising the system. And obviously, Andrew McKinley did an interview after the announcement, and he spoke about the way it's going to be used, and he spoke about the fact that when Graham Jones comes on board, Graham Jones started his permanent role with us yesterday, Monday the 25th, I believe it was, which at time of recording was yesterday, was his first official day at the club. I'm sure we'll probably hear from him in some capacity over the next few days, I would imagine. Or maybe not. He might be a guy that just likes to be in the background and do his job. So time will tell on that one. But it sounds as if the analytics is going to be kind of coupled with him and his people, as well as obviously the scouting team that we currently have at Hearts, to hopefully start kind of rolling in that kind of player trading model that seems to have done the likes of Brighton in particular relatively well. And we will see, obviously, the levels of success it can bring for us, which time will tell. As I say, we've seen many things in Scottish football come up and not live up to the expectations of down south, VAR being one of them. But yeah, we will certainly see how it goes and roll with the waves that come along with that. But yeah, John, what were your thoughts when you heard about the Jamestown agreement being reached? Was it a case of relief and obviously a bit of an element of, well, we knew it was coming?
In my case, I never really looked into the whole Jamestown Analytics thing until after the deal was officially announced in any sort of detail. Having read more about it, I'm very curious to see what it can achieve here. Like you've mentioned there, it's got a track record of success pretty much everywhere it's been used. I think particularly Brighton is the example that most use. They've made absolutely fantastic strides using it. It's going to provide exclusive access to this analytics database, which is considered to be cutting edge. And in fact, Andrew McKinley referred to it as, quote, groundbreaking. So it's very exciting to see what we can achieve using that going forward. I think it's come along this deal at a fantastic time. What with the struggles we've had so far this season, but with January right around the corner, it's going to be interesting to see just how immediately we can start to see change from it, because as we've been aware, Hearts have been using this for a while. It was instrumental in the recruitment of Critchley. Graham Jones is understood to be, as you mentioned, he's going to be a very vital part of that process. So I'm wondering how the sporting director role that he's taking on is going to be different than we've seen in Scotland up until now. The two major questions really that I would have are: does it provide a leg up on everyone else in Scotland, or just how much of an impact can it make up here with the duopoly that exists in Scottish football? It's very unique in that. It's quite different from down south. It's different from over in Germany where it's been used before. So I'm going to be very curious to see how much, if at all, the Jamestown Analytics database is going to allow us to try and close the gap to the old firm. Bearing in mind, of course, that we need to get out of the mire we're in just now, and we'll talk about that more as the show goes on. But very curious. I kind of went out of my way not to read too much about it until the deal was announced, because analytics and stuff like that gives me a headache, if I'm honest. Like when we're both big Football Manager fans, and as you know, my least favorite part of that game is analytics and opposition scouting. I just don't do it.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. I think you're absolutely right in terms of the game changer aspect, but how much of a game changer that can be. I think we've spoken kind of before, myself and Ewan, about how far ahead Celtic and Rangers are of everybody else, and the realistic possibility of somebody consistently challenging that. Obviously, Aberdeen are doing it this season at the moment, which is obviously a positive for them. And we finished third last season, so it's possible you can get close, but just how close can you get? And obviously, is there that window of being able to perhaps overtake one, or if by some miracle both of them, and lift some silverware at the end of a campaign, would be a phenomenal
Yeah,
return. But obviously, I'm not going to sit here and say I want Hearts to win the league within 5 years. I don't think that's particularly realistic. But I think
we've
there was
heard that before.
there was a I just wanted to kind of give a shout out before we kind of move on to my next point about Tony Bloom and stuff. There was a podcast that popped up on my YouTube over the last few weeks, and it's called Improving Scottish Football, at Improving Scottish Football, and they did a podcast episode 2 weeks ago about the analytics and the data, and it was how Hearts will embrace data and analytics in their sort of day-to-day operation. So lasts about half an hour long. If anybody hasn't watched it or hasn't come across it, please give it a view, because it was certainly a very, very informative episode for me to kind of get my teeth into, because like you, I'm not big on the analytics side of things. I can understand them, I can make sense of them, but it's not something that I tend to judge football matches on, because I just go with what I see as a you know as a punter, I suppose, as
Yeah.
a non-educated punter of football. But yeah, it's certainly, football seems to be going down the route of analytics and data-driven kind of recruitment and stuff. So if, like you say, it gives us some form of leg up, then that would be a massive, massive bonus, because I think we can both agree that player trading over the last however many years at Hearts has always been very average at best. We don't have a
Yeah.
great track record of bringing players in and moving them on for profits. It's more a case of bring them in, get the best out of them, and then watch them leave for nothing at the end of contracts, which again will hopefully be something that is a thing of the past if we're able to manage it right. Um, in terms of Tony Bloom, obviously his involvement with Jamestown led to a lot of people questioning that, and there was headlines in newspapers about Tony Bloom wanting to invest in Hearts as a minority shareholder. I think some people, myself included, kind of tied the two events together and thought, well, if Jamestown's coming on board, then surely that must maybe come with the caveat that Tony Bloom is
Yeah.
given some shares. I'm not going to say he's just going to be gifted them, but I kind of maybe perhaps naively kind of coupled the two events together, when maybe, as it has been worked out in the end, both are completely separate from one another. Tony Bloom is keen to come on board as a minority shareholder to the tune of £10 million worth of investment. And obviously, we don't know what that £10 million will be spent on. It'll probably likely be background infrastructures. And then, there's obviously the talk about the Orium and the long term future of training facilities and things like that. So that could help towards that. Or, who knows, some of it might get put into the player budgets. We'll wait and see if it even happens. There was talk from the Foundation of Hearts about it as well. They put a statement out not long after that was kind of public knowledge, basically saying, the club takes seriously any kind of investment opportunities, because Anne Budge herself has mentioned in previous years that they've often had people asking to get on board with Hearts because it's such an attractive proposition with the fan ownership model. And they've batted away a lot of interest because it's just not been right. And obviously, we've been stung before by an investor coming in and promising the world and delivering well, delivering what he delivered, and then disappearing
The
on
Scottish
his.
Cups,
Yeah,
to be fair.
well, exactly, exactly. And listen, I wouldn't, and I know like it's probably quite a cliche question, and I won't go down the rabbit hole with it, but I certainly wouldn't have changed those years for the world, if I knew how it was going to end.
Yeah,
But obviously, he
agreed,
disappeared in
agreed.
his. Yeah, he disappeared in his submarine, never to be seen again. And I think the foundation of Hearts with their model, i.e., the 90% vote structure, that is basically designed to safeguard that from ever happening again. The Tony Bloom investment is slightly different for me. I think, and again, it might be me being very simple and basic, but to me, it just screams as a no brainer. If this guy wants to come on board, he wants to be involved. He's got capital to do it. He's got experience and knowledge of being at clubs that have grown with him involved in them. Obviously, he's not been the main part of it, but it's not a coincidence. And this guy, and I did a Facebook Live about it a little while ago when there was talks about it. It's a guy that's made his money in gambling. So, you could say, oh, he's taking a risk. But the way that he made his money was basically by analytics and algorithms of making sure that he knew what the best and most likely bets were to win. Some people might say it's a bit cheaty, but he's just an absolute mathematical genius by the sounds of things to be able to kind of pick odds in his favour, and 9 times out of 10 he'd come out a winner. And so hopefully that kind of translates into his business acumen, which it appears to, because he seems to have quite a large net worth from what I read. But yeah, I think I can understand if there's people out there that are skeptical about it, because again, like I say, we've had our fingers burnt before with investment coming in from outside. But I would like to hope and like to think that the foundation will take this interest seriously and see it as an opportunity to move forward. Because I was having a conversation with someone about this. There's only so far that a fan ownership model can take you in this level of football. I think the German model, I think it's the 50 plus one, or maybe 49 plus one, I can't remember off the top of my head, but they have a German fan ownership model where every football club in the Bundesliga is owned primarily by the fans, and then they have the 1% vote that, kind of allows them to not be put into the hands of foreign ownership. And I feel like that may be something that Hearts should perhaps look at, because it allows outside investment, but it also gives the fans that final say of yes or no, we want to do this or we don't. But with that investment, like I say, in terms of the ceiling that a ownership model can get to, that investment could take it up a notch, because our investment and our, the foundation of Hearts and the fans putting money in every month, that will reach a finite number. And they're obviously looking at trying to bring in new investment from the fans and the future generations and stuff. That's what a lot of the foundation is geared towards. But again, that's not going to happen tomorrow. That there has to be that element of how do we take it forward. And I think Tony Bloom, if he's coming along saying, I'll give you some money, I'm wanting to be involved, that is a no-brainer for me. What do you think?
Um, it's interesting. I think you mentioned that in terms of the nuts and bolts of it, this investment opportunity and the deal with Jamestown Analytics are not officially aligned with each other. But I think that for us to maximize the possibilities that come with access to the Jamestown database, we need the money to be out and to go out and recruit the players that we're looking for.
Yeah.
I do think that we are looking at investing a large chunk of it in the football operations side of things. We are making so many changes there. You've got your new sporting director, Graham Jones, who I'm quite excited about. Just tonight, the Heart Standard put up a post probably about an hour or so ago about Shelley Kerr, former Women's Scotland manager. She's
Right.
apparently on the verge of becoming Hearts' new technical development manager, which is a role to oversee the transition from the academy to the first team. So it looks like there's basically an entire overhaul of the backroom staff and how it operates in football operations. Angus Beath was just appointed the new B team head coach. So there's so many changes being made in the football operations department. In order to maximise the possibilities that that brings and to maximise this database and the deal we have with Jamestown, we're going to need some money to go out and pay fees potentially, and certainly to pay the sort of wages that players are going to be looking for to take us to that next level. If we're ever going to be, if we're ever going to challenge up at that kind of top two in the SPFL Premiership, we need the money to if we can't compete with the budgets, we need the money to at least find the right players using the system and the leg up that it does give us.
Yeah.
So I do think that we need to look very long and hard at this Bloom proposal, and only providing obviously that fans continue to be the majority shareholder. We certainly have to be looking at trying to get that deal done with him because it's a lot of money for a Scottish club, and it could be an absolute game changer for us, particularly at this time of the year.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I think it's one of those things. Obviously, we've kind of spoken a little bit about it there, and it'll be scaled in terms of the budgets that we have and the budgets we have to work with, which may make it obviously it's not going to be the same pool of players that Brighton are picking from. Let's be honest, they're going out there spending absolute fortunes. But if we can tailor it to what we have and what we need and what Neil Critchley needs, it could be a game changer. And I think that in itself is a
Yeah,
very very exciting prospect.
yeah.
But
And
yeah,
I think
as I
I think the sorry if I can just put in
oh
there
no,
for one
of course
last
you can.
point. I think the opposition analysis aspect of it is where that really comes into play. Because it's an opportunity for us to say, right, what do we need to beat Rangers? What do we need to overtake Aberdeen? What do we need to start to put a dent in Celtic?
It's true.
And
It's
then we
true.
can budget for that, and then it gives you that chance to think about who can we bring in on the budgets that we can realistically raise. And we're going to talk about Europa Conference League later. That's going to factor in as well in the financial aspect. Ultimately, this is a business, and money brings you the best players. So if this guy is willing to invest that kind of money in Hearts, we shouldn't be worrying too much about the club's identity as fan owned, because it can be fan owned in a majority sense and still keep its identity. I think it's a very intelligent bit of business to at least entertain it.
Definitely, definitely. And I think what you say before we move on to Celtic, I'll just kind of touch on it briefly. What you said about in terms of the background changes and stuff like that, it shows that there's development happening there. It shows that the club know what they need and the people ultimately that they identify to do those jobs, which is massively important. I think our neighbours across the city are a bit guilty of that at the moment, having people in positions that don't really know what they're doing, and
Yeah.
that translates to on the pitch as well, because I don't think a
Hmm.
lot of their players know what they're doing. Certainly not their goalkeeper anyway. I don't think he
Yeah.
remembers he can use his hands. But yeah, it smacks of a
Yeah.
very competent and well organized organization if we are just getting
I
things
mean, yeah.
done.
I mean, yeah. You've got so much. Look at these two people in particular, Graham Jones and Shelley Kerr. What do
Yeah,
they have in common? What were both the previous employers were the Scottish national team.
yeah,
She
it's
was the
fair.
head coach of the women's national team and took Scotland to the 2019 World Cup. Graham Jones I think, was he the head of development or something like that for the
Yeah.
SFA or something along those lines. He had a kind of similar back office kind of job there. We
Mhm.
haven't chosen these people by accident or just because. This has been done with a purpose. Like
Definitely,
the experience they
definitely.
bring is going to be outrageously valuable in the long run.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So I think there's definitely some interesting and exciting times ahead, providing everything seems to fall into place, which hopefully it does. But we'll move on to, as I said at the top of the show, the feeling of deja vu.
Yeah,
Celtic came to Tynecastle on Saturday evening for a 7:45 kickoff, which is an absolute farce, by the way. But Sky gets what Sky wants.
yeah,
So yeah, it's to me, I'll never understand a 7:45 kickoff on a Saturday. It just baffles me. A large percentage of the fans that were in attendance would have likely spent the afternoon in the pubs, which is, you know what, fair play to them. I would have done exactly the same thing.
yeah,
But that builds up to a certain type of atmosphere inside the stadium, which we'll kind of touch on as we go along. And
yeah.
I'm not going to give it much in the way of headline because I don't really want to. But the game itself and in general, as I say, it's a feeling of deja vu. It's a feeling of we called last week's episode missed opportunities. We may as well call this week's one as well the same thing because
It's
it's
opportunities too, Electric Boogaloo.
like it. I like it. It's becoming a bit of a pattern at the moment where we just seem to not quite have that final bit. But all the
Yeah,
bits round the side of it seem to be quite good, but we just don't have that final bit in the bigger games. We said it, as I say, after the Heidenheim game. I've mentioned it after countless games under Critchley so far that we have all the promise and we have all the oomph, but no end result, unfortunately.
yeah.
But with the Celtic game, I felt like the team selection in particular was interesting. He went with a midfield three to begin with. I think, and it's funny, I was talking to somebody earlier about this, about Neil Critchley in terms of the players, like the playing staff, because he's been in the job for a good few weeks now. So I think we can kind of analyse it a little bit further than we have done. He clearly has a group of players that he feels he can trust. And I would say you're maybe looking at 13 or 14 players in particular that he's picking frequently. Be it, the obviously average, the regular starting 11, if you want to call it that. The back four appears to be settled. Aside from the right back area, I think that's one that it's Adam Forrester or Oyugoki. It can kind of go either way. Left back appears to be James Penrice, and I have absolutely no problem with that whatsoever. And then you have Kai Rolls and Kent, who've played a majority of the games together. You've got Stephen Kingsley that can come in and rotate within that. Midfield, he likes his Boatengs, his Bennies. Obviously, those two are athletic and they can get about the pitch, which helps. Cammy Devlin is favoured. I'm not going to list every single player, but there's certain players that are on the fringes of a Neil Critchley side that I look at and I go, you're not quite in there yet. You're not quite there. You're maybe just on the skirt of it, but you're not quite there yet. And then there appear to be a few players that have kind of been cast aside as players that maybe Neil Critchley has identified just maybe don't have the legs or don't have the ability or the energy or the stamina or energy or whatever to do that high press system that he wants to do. But I was relatively happy with the starting 11 that we put out, and I felt like it was bold from Critchley to do that. But obviously, being at Tynecastle, he's going to go out to try and satisfy the majority of the fans in the stadium by putting a team out that's going to attack and going to have a go, because that's basically what he's promising fans, that they'll be entertained. And I have to say, I have been so far under Neil Critchley, I've been impressed with what I've seen. But the issue and the worry is that blunt final product, which is the only thing that's missing. But obviously, it's the most important thing that you need to win football matches.
Yes, Critchley has done a pretty excellent job of, map reading and taking the horse to the river. He's walked that horse all the way to the river, but he cannot force the horse to drink. You know, he can't score the goals. He needs the strikers and the forward line to start scoring the goals and putting them away. We started excellently on Saturday night. Like that's some of the finest football that I've seen Hearts play all year. Penrice in particular was just explosive. He was all over the place, man. Blair Spittle had an early chance that he snatched at. Unfortunately, he was basically clean through, but he snatched at it, and Schmeichel kind of easily hoovers that up. He managed to very comfortably handle the low drive from Penrice as well. But the players were getting into fantastic positions. Even I felt that Lawrence Shankland did a fantastic job of getting in good positions this past Saturday. He had a couple of stick-on chances, quite frankly, that he should have put away. And I felt so sorry. I felt really bad for Shankland watching the replay, because there was a look on his face at times of almost disbelief, because it's probably some of the best play I've seen from Shankland all year, actually, as well.
Yeah, I'm with
In
you.
terms of getting in positions to get the shot off, it's the best I've seen him. It's just not. It just refuses to fall for him at the moment, and
I know.
it's frustrating as hell. It really is so frustrating to watch. I feel bad for him, and I feel bad for a lot of them, because that first half deserved at least one goal. We should have potentially been in the lead by the end of the first half. I don't feel like Gordon was tested in any way until closer to the hour mark when Celtic scored their
Mm-hmm.
first goal.
Mm-hmm.
And even at that, like when in the few times that they did come close to testing Gordon, he did fantastically well. And also, there was really nothing he could have done in any of the four goals. The penalty was a really well struck penalty. The first goal was again, much like I think it was the Kelly game. One of the goals that
Mm-hmm.
Kelly scored when they beat us 2-1, like it was just a bizarre
Yeah.
ricochet off the
Mm-hmm.
Oyugoki clearance,
Yep.
which, to be fair, I'm not entirely sure what the offensive handball rule is nowadays, but previously that would have been ruled out, because any handball in an offensive move previously was a handball and should have been chalked off. But I don't know if that's also been changed in addition to the defensive handball rule. But I know that was
Probably.
definitely the case in Serie A until recently. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the second goal from Kuhn was just an absolute rocket.
Yeah.
Celtic were clinical. and that's what Celtic do. When Celtic get going, they're unstoppable. Their
Yeah.
forward line were in lethal form in the second half. Um, and Hearts' defensive frailties, unfortunately, came back to haunt them again. I
Yeah.
don't feel like I felt like right back was a glaring flaw um, on Saturday night. That's something we need. We need a settled right back. We need someone to step up there and take that role by the throat. Oyegoki has shown flashes. Adam Forster has shown potential, but we need someone there that's got the combination of experience and talent. We just don't have that at the moment. Gerald Taylor, who knows if he's going to turn into that when he comes back? We
Yeah.
don't know, and we don't know. I don't think there's even a time scale on his return yet. Um, just another frustrating night where
Yeah.
we could have gotten something more out of the game. Um, but again, a lot of positives weirdly to look at, especially in that first half. Um,
Yeah.
I was absolutely delighted for Musa picking up his first goal. It was an absolute rocket as well. Like, where has he been hiding all season?
Yeah. Oh, don't even,
It was a
honestly.
beautiful, beautiful strike, man. And if I can just give, if I can give a shout and some credit to the embattled Kenneth Vargas, he did fantastically well. He was instrumental in the goal as well. He went in there combatively, won the ball, played a nice pass, no messing about, and
Yeah.
helped Musa to help with the setup for that goal. So hats off to Vargas after what was, I'm sure, a difficult week for him mentally of
Yeah.
his own making in large part. But we won't get into that too deep unless you want to touch on that later. But I just felt that again it was like Penrice was once again fantastic. Um,
Yeah.
I felt that
Yeah.
both centre halves were pretty poor in the second half, and that
Yeah.
again
I'm
was
with you.
just
I'm with you.
it was
I think.
frustrating. It was just another case of first half. If there was a we might if there was a we just about edged the first half title, we would probably be well out of sight by now because it's been the case all season. We
I
probably
know.
just
I
about
know.
edged the first half. Could be your middle name.
I think we might change the name of the podcast to that just to try
Yeah,
and bring up some more.
we've edged the first half.
That's it. First half FC. That's us.
Yeah,
Um, I do. I do.
remember it was second half FC last year for a bit.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. If we can find some happy medium, we might be doing all right. But
Yeah,
no, I'll echo your thoughts on Penrice, and I thought he was fantastic again. But I think the Penrice and Spittle combination down that left hand side is just fantastic. The pair of them just seem to
yes, I agree.
know, and they link up incredibly well, and they're very much in tune with each other, which I think is obviously,
Yeah,
purely from the fact that they've played quite a lot together down that side, which obviously has built that relationship between them, which is helpful. And the deliveries that they can put in are fantastic. And like you say, Shanklin was unlucky to not be on the end of at least one of them that jumps to my memory. But I think Spittle and Penrice, and the only note that I've got about the two of them is that they're currently having a player of the season off between them. One of those two is going to win player of the season at this point. And it's like
I
a
mean
it's
it's
a
Penrice so far. I think.
I think you're right. I think you're right there. But I
Yeah,
think they've both just settled in very well, and they just seem to be working. Musa, like you say, very happy for him. Comes off the bench, and it's funny. I was listening to the Heart Standard instant reaction that they do after the games, and they spoke about Musa, and they said, he's come off the bench against Old Firm sides and actually looked all right, and then disappeared again because he came on against Rangers at Ibrox, I'm sure it was, and he looked
that's
okay.
right.
And then
Yeah.
he's come
Hmm.
on against Celtic and bagged himself a goal. So there's obviously something about him. Day of recording, it's actually his birthday today, his 23rd birthday.
That's
So
right. Happy
you
birthday,
know,
Musa.
yeah, he certainly crowned it with a good goal, a good way to get off the mark for Hearts, and hopefully it's the first of many. Critchley kind of spoke about him and sort of said that he's trained well and he's played himself into contention to play more games, which is what you want. They played a bounce game during the international break, and he scored two
Yeah,
goals
yeah.
against Dundee.
Musa Drame is
Again,
the John Robertson of bounce games.
well, this is the thing. I completely forgot that we played a bounce game previously, and he got two in that one as
Yeah.
well. So he's
Who
definitely
else
knocking
scored?
at the door. Liam Boyce, wasn't it? Was it
Liam
Boise?
Boyce.
Yeah, it was that. It was
Justice
Boise.
for
So,
Boise. Get him on.
we'll, we'll, we'll
Boise Drame partnership on Sunday.
oh God. well, what I was going to say before I kind of move on to Vargas was the only annoying thing about Musa is obviously you want him to have that momentum, you want him to go forward and play the next
Hmm.
game and be involved in the next game, but he's not
Yeah.
registered for our European squad. So we'll have to wait until the playoff, should we get to that, that we'll be able to register him again for the next round of European fixtures. So he will unfortunately miss the game against Bruges on Thursday evening. But on Vargas, I agree with you. I kind of, again, did some instant reaction to the news the day after because I missed it when it was happening due to being on night shift. So I did it the day after and I spoke about it. It was a silly statement to make, but he's gone back home on his international duty. He's been asked a question by an interviewer who's clearly been looking for a story, and he has been misquoted. And I'll take Vargas's word for that, for him saying he's been misquoted, he's been misrepresented from what he actually meant to say. Ultimately, he's a young guy that has a dream to play in the top five levels of football, the top five big leagues in football, and he's not going to do that at Hearts. He's not going to play at the top of the game at Hearts. But yeah, there's an element of, do you know what, Kenny, just put up. Do you know what I mean? Just front up and show that you've got the potential to do that. Because I do think there is a player in Kenny Vargas, and I've said it a lot. He's a rough diamond at the moment, and I think he has to realize that he's not ready for that step yet. And I think the statement that he then released on his Instagram the next day or 2 days after, kind of explaining himself to the fans, because obviously, quite rightly, the interview was met with quite a lot of hard feelings towards him, and quite a lot of people were
Yeah.
rather critical of him, myself included. I didn't like it, and I don't think many Hearts fans would have liked it. But the statement he put out after, he kind of apologized and set things straight, and basically said he's just a kid with a dream. And I think these sorts of players that come across from South American leagues and all the rest of it, they want to make that jump into European football. They want to make a name for themselves, and Kenny clearly wants to do that. We've seen it in some of the goals that he attempts to score and fluffs them, because and I'm sure it was you that said he always goes for the Hollywood goal. Sometimes you just need to score a tap in. Sometimes you just need to keep it simple. And I'm sure that Neil Critchley will be drumming that into him. But the one thing I will say, when he came off the bench against Celtic, and the Heart Standard boys summed it up perfectly. There was a ripple of applause and some ripple of boos, but I think by that point we were out of the game. The game was done, so I don't really think anybody was really all that arsed that he came on, to tell you the truth. But yeah, hopefully, like I say, he gets his head down and just gets back to playing, because there is a player in there for sure.
100%, man. Yeah. The problems that I have with his comments, um, and I think that they were daft comments. Whether he was misquoted or not, it feels like he's kind of accepted that the gist of it was that he sees himself moving on and playing at a higher level. Now
Yeah,
he's it's rather idiotic, I think, to criticise the standard of this league when, quite frankly, on the whole, if you look at the season so far, Kenny Vargas has been poor. He hasn't met expectations. He certainly hasn't done anything to achieve the sort of move that he seems to be after. And if he was poor before, he really needs to work his arse off the rest of the year to win back some of that goodwill. Cammy Devlin even referenced that, and Cammy, it turns out, is a very close friend of his, and it looks like
yeah,
he was a person that Kenny turned to, and Devlin backed him. And if Devlin is saying that he believes Kenny Vargas loves being at Hearts and
yeah,
that he wants to play for the club, then I'm inclined to believe Cammy.
yeah.
But he really needs to knuckle down and earn every bit of applause at this point, because you don't do that. You just
No,
don't. It's a
yeah,
stupid
no,
thing to
I'm
do.
with you.
And I
I'm
think
with you.
ultimately, long term, I think it could be a positive for him, because it will be a learning experience. And I think that
Yeah,
that's where Critchley will be a far better role model in that kind of situation than Naismith would have been previously. I think
mm-hmm.
Critchley is exactly the kind of guy that you want running things when it comes to a situation like this with a player.
Yeah,
I have faith in Critchley to get the best out of him following that, but ultimately Vargas needs to do the work and work his arse off the rest of the way. Um,
yeah,
like I said earlier, he was instrumental in Musa's goal, so he pops up with a decent wee bit of play there.
yeah,
This needs to be more consistent though, and he needs to stop with the theatrics and with
yeah.
the nonsensical decision making on the pitch. He
Yeah,
needs to stop with his self interest basically when he's on the pitch. He can wear whatever he wants and take whatever pictures he wants on Instagram. When he's on that pitch, he needs to be selfless and work
totally.
to score goals, not to up his own kind of market value.
Yeah, I think you made a good point about Devlin sort of coming to his aid a little bit. I think I watched the interview that he gave when he spoke about that, and Kenny kind of reaching out to him as looking for an ally, which is nice to see. It's nice to see that they have each other's backs. I think maybe the sort of way I interpreted it was maybe a case of Cammy Devlin kind of had been in a similar situation, not in the sense of he'd given an interview and said what Vargas said, but maybe coming across from Australia, he thought Scottish football's the jumping off point for him to then go and
Yeah.
play down south or whatever. It's there's no secret, and Cammy Devlin makes no secret of the fact he's a Liverpool fan and has basically said one day he'd love to play at Anfield. So that's an ambition, but maybe Cammy's kind of settled down over the last year or two or whatever, how long he's been at Hearts, and realised that he's actually got a good thing here, and maybe him being that influence to Vargas is not such a bad thing.
100%, man. Yeah, I've always gotten the impression that Devlin, when he first arrived at Hearts, saw Hearts as a stepping stone. I feel like he was quite open about that. However, things have transpired differently, and I think he feels, like you say, a lot more at home here than he had expected to. The one thing that he mentioned that I kind of took note of, especially, was he mentioned the distance. Obviously, it's kind of Cammy's come from one end of the kind of earth,
Yeah,
and Vargas has kind of come from the opposite. And the point he made about Vargas as well was that he doesn't really speak great English, and so I feel like that leaves him, I think, more open to unfairly being sort of tried in the court of public opinion
yeah,
in a case like this, because he doesn't really have the skill set in the English language to sort of rebuke the translations that have been made of what he said. Like if he says he's been misquoted, like who are we to sort of argue otherwise? Like I certainly don't speak Spanish. I don't speak. I barely speak English. I don't know about you, but like, um, so
aye,
I do feel
same.
like it's kind of like it's like being tried in the court of public opinion without due process, so to speak.
Mm, yeah,
And so I felt like that was a great point that Devlin made. And if Cami says that Vargas loves being here and that we should give him a break, I'm inclined to side with Cami.
yeah, I would echo that certainly, and we'll move on swiftly from the as I said, and as I've continued to say throughout this episode, the deja vu effect, the deja vu feeling of yet another game where we just didn't quite have enough. Hopefully, in our next game, we might just have enough. Our next game, obviously, being Cercle Bruges in the Europa Conference League, away from home. A nice trip for our fan base to go across to Bruges and enjoy themselves responsibly, I hope. But let's be honest, it's a travelling support for a European tie. I don't think there'll be a lot of responsible folk there at the moment. And fair play to them. I'd certainly be there if I could, but sadly not. But yeah, in terms of Bruges themselves, I haven't really seen too much of them. I did a little bit of kind of reading into them earlier on today in preparation for this and kind of looked at a few bits and pieces. They had a very good season last year domestically. They finished just behind Anderlecht. They finished in fourth in the top flight of Belgian football, just behind Anderlecht, Club Bruges, and a certain Union Saint Gallen, backed by Tony Bloom. So that was a good season for them to finish in fourth. That obviously got them into the Conference League. They look a decent side. They certainly look a decent side. They haven't had the best of seasons thus far, though. Quite similar to ourselves. They currently sit. Now I've got this written down somewhere. Bruges,
14th.
they're 14th. That's right. Yep, they're
Yeah.
14th. Thanks for that. I just clocked it just as you said it as well. I clocked it in my notes. They're currently 14th in the Belgian top flight with just 4 wins from their opening 15 games. So again, maybe a quite similar predicament to ourselves in that sense. Um, Again, I did a little bit of research into them. They are obviously on 4 points in the Conference League. They've had a win, a draw, and a loss from their opening 3 games. We're currently on 6 points, having 2 wins and one defeat, following the last round defeat to Heidenheim. It's very interesting reading about, this is kind of what I've liked about the Conference League. It's brought different teams to me that I didn't really
Mhm.
pay much attention to, in different leagues that I didn't pay much attention to prior to obviously A, doing the podcast, and B, being interested in who Hearts are playing against. But Cercle Bruges appear to be a certain side that, and I was listening to a thing that our very own Ewan sent me earlier on from the Evening News. It was the Hearts Digest, the little podcast that they have, and it was Barry Anderson speaking about them and basically saying they don't play like a typical Belgian side. They're very kind of not one-dimensional, it's the wrong word, but they seem to have a different style of play. It's not a case of tiki-taka football. It's not about possession-based. It's about lump it, get the opportunity and lump it up the pitch. And that it'll be interesting to see how we can deal with that and how we can handle that. The one
Mhm.
positive that I will say about them is that their top goal scorer and star striker Kevin Denke has recently departed to FC Cincinnati. So he has left. I think he was their top goal scorer the last time I checked. He certainly was anyway. So he seems to have left a bit of a hole with his departure, which could be a benefit to us. And from what I had
Yes.
watched earlier on, it was again through the Heart Standards. They did a piece on Cercle Bruges and they spoke with a Belgian football expert about it, and he kind of said they've not really figured out what they're going to do next. They've not really figured out, the way they're going to fill that gap. So maybe that's something that we can hopefully take advantage of.
Yeah.
But I think it'll be an interesting tie. And I've said this before about these games in Europe. It's bonus games. It's bonus games. They're games that are nice to have, but you could say they're a bit of a distraction at the moment from where we are domestically, which is obviously the bread and butter. I feel like I say that every time we're talking about a European game, but it is fact.
So
It would
that
be
is, yeah.
nice. It would be nice to get something in Bruges. Certainly would be. We're not far off securing a place in the next round via the playoffs, hopefully. But the sooner we can wrap that up, the better. So I think it'll be an interesting tie to watch. And again, they don't play, like I said, they don't play a typical Belgian style of football. They have an Austrian manager whose name escapes me. Again, I've got it written in my notes somewhere, but I've got that many scribbles that I can't make them out. Um, so maybe that contributes to the differing style from other sides in Belgium and the typical Belgian standard of football. But yeah, I think it'll be an interesting tie, and I wonder, obviously, with Aberdeen at the weekend, which in itself is a massive game, which we'll kind of touch on briefly before we end. I wonder what Critchley's thought process will be in terms of going to Bruges. Who are the sort of players that we'll see, and how will that affect the lineup on Sunday or on the weekend against Aberdeen?
Yeah, a couple of things jump out to me about Miron Muzic's Cercle Rouge
Mm.
club. One of which is how young their squad is. The other being the tactical style that you just mentioned. It's unique among our Conference League opponents in that it's, I think, more similar to the type of football we play domestically week to week. We play a lot of teams that like to hoof a ball up and try to kind of play direct football. So that should stand to reason that it would serve as an advantage to us away from home in Europe to be playing a more similar side. I mean, it hasn't really been paying off domestically this year, so I might be a bit hasty on that. But so those two things really serve as, I think, positives for us, and certainly as poor as we've been, like Cercle Brugge haven't had a particularly great season so far either. We have currently a 93% chance of qualifying for the next round. So we have a high chance of getting through. In other words, you don't need to be Tony Bloom to consider that a safe bet. Um, I'm optimistic. Like you say, it's going to be very interesting to see what Critchley does. We're going to be absent Musa, so there won't be a chance to chuck him in to try and get more momentum behind him. What I do wonder is, could this be the last chance for the Shanklin Vargas partnership before that gets ripped up? Because if Musa is going to come in and give us a threat of the sort of level he produced against Celtic on Saturday night, it might be time to rip up the scripts and go with something different. What different means, though, I don't know. Would Musa and Vargas be the pairing you look at? Would
See,
Shankland and
I,
Musa work?
I have, I have
These are the
my.
different.
No, I was just gonna say I have my thoughts on that, but I'll touch on it when we speak about
Yeah.
Aberdeen because I want to hear what you think about it. But yeah, anyway,
Mhm.
continue. Sorry.
No, like yeah, it's like it's going to be very interesting to see what he goes with. Does he give the Shanklin Vargas partnership one last chance, or has he already committed to keeping that partnership as the front two and working and letting them work their way out of the woes that they've been in? There's so many different ways that this could go in terms of tactical. Do we change the shape at all, or do we just go with the 4-4-2 and meet the sort of gung ho Route One style of Cercle Brugge with the same? fight fire with fire almost. Where I'm worried is our lack of goals might be our undoing in that kind of battle. If we go toe to toe with a team and it's just attack versus attack, we don't have a great attack. That's like our biggest weakness at the moment.
Yeah.
So it's going to be very. I'm very curious to see how Critchley will line them up and see how, if at all, differently we approach the sort of especially opening minutes, because from what I can gather, Cercle Brugge like to overload the opposition early in
Yeah.
much the same way that we do. Do we change tack and try and sort of wear them out? Do we go the Muhammad Ali route and rope-a-dope them into submission? It's going to be a very interesting game, and hopefully we can get something out of it. Although I think you've touched on it earlier, the big one is Aberdeen on Sunday. I think
Yeah.
Aberdeen is the big one for me.
Yeah.
We need to get a result there.
Yeah.
We need to do everything in our power to try and get something out of that game, because, like I said, time will eventually run out. It's not yet, but it's going to at some point. And after
Yeah.
Aberdeen, we have a very, very manageable schedule throughout December. December gives us a probably, I hesitate to say easiest run, but it's the least stressful run that we could probably have asked for at this time in the season. If we can get a result against Aberdeen, and it's worth remembering that last season we went through a rough start, nowhere near to the degree as this year, but it was against Aberdeen that turned around. It was following the
Yeah.
Aberdeen game that Shankland had his legendary rant in the dugout or the dressing room, and things really started to turn from there. Could history repeat itself? Let's
Who
hope so,
knows?
because we need that.
Yeah, yeah. I think the Aberdeen tie, like you say, is a big game for us. Not in terms of catching Aberdeen, certainly more about getting ourselves out of the funk that we've been in
Huh.
recently. And obviously, it's a tie that seems to favour the home side and has done in recent games between the two. So there's that you kind of hang your hat on. But I was Aberdeen. I've got a few wee notes again. Aberdeen, they lost obviously their previous domestic game, and obviously this was,
Yep.
for a peek behind the curtain. We're recording this as Aberdeen and Hibs have just finished. I'll tell you the full time score in a minute if you've not seen it. But Aberdeen, prior to this evening, and that's not a spoiler by the way, prior to this evening, they lost against St Mirren. Their last loss was on March the 13th. It was their first league defeat in 20 games when they lost against St Mirren. They have this evening drawn 3-3 with Hibs. They were 3-2 up, and Hibs appear to have levelled it with the last kick of the game, which keeps Hibs below us, which is something to write home about. But yeah, I think you're right. I think Aberdeen, it is a big game. It's an important fixture, and it's always one of those games that Hearts fans kind of look at as a game, particularly the Tynecastle one, that we should be going out and winning that game. And I think
Yes.
it will be interesting to see what happens. And obviously, you have to factor in the travelling for Europe, etc., as we have done, and that will be factored in. My thoughts, and you sort of mentioned the striking options and the way that they could be configured. I I don't expect Critchley to do it because it would go against the shapes that he's played in recent games. But if it were me, I would be playing Shankland slightly deeper, and I'd be playing Musa and Vargas in front of him. Put Shankland in that sort of old-fashioned number 10, because his hold-up play and his flick-ons are there. He can hold the ball up. He can bring people in. He likes playing Aberdeen. He likes to wind them up a little bit, obviously following
Yes.
previous previous
Yeah.
clubs, shall we say?
Hmm.
So there may well be a bit of extra fire in him for that game. Hopefully there is, because I think we need it, or he certainly needs it. Um, but yeah, it does have the feel of a very very big game, and like you say, the turning point, etc., that it has been in the past. It could very well be that is a game that we do turn a corner. And I've said it a few times that I do, and you kind of mentioned it briefly there, so I won't go too far into it. But the games we have after this little spell, and when you look at the spell of games that we've had Celtic, we had Hibs, we had Celtic, we had Rangers, we had Heidenheim, who are a Bundesliga side. Now we've got Aberdeen, who are top three and deservedly so at the moment, top two and deservedly so at the moment. They're going toe to toe with
Yeah.
Celtic, which is fantastic for anyone to do that. So it's a
Yeah.
very, very tough run of fixtures that we've had. And for the number of times, obviously, I've spoken throughout this about the deja vu feeling, about that feeling of, oh God, here we go again, and all missed opportunities, etc. We have played some very, very big games, and we've come very, very close to getting some good results. So you hope that now that run is kind of behind us. Obviously, it will be after Aberdeen. We can start to look at these games and go, right, that's a winnable game, right? Let's go into that game and win that and try and put some points on the board, because
Yeah.
Scottish football and the way the top flight is, anyone can beat anyone in that sort of middle of the pack. And that, I think, has to be something that we capitalise on. I think the issue we've had so far this season is we've not been beating everyone. We've not been beating anyone, and everybody's been beating everybody
Yes.
else. So that's why we're kind of a little bit of
Yeah.
trouble. But I'm not worrying about the long term. I'm not concerned about, the dreaded R word, the relegation word, particularly while our neighbours are in there. I don't have any worries about finishing stone dead last. But there are, like you say, there has to be a point where that time runs out and we have to turn a corner. And if we are able to pick up a bit of momentum between now and January, and then see what the Jamestown Analytics can spit out for us in terms of new recruits for January, and we kind of take it from there. I do feel like, and again, this is probably me getting a bit ahead of myself in terms of episodes to come, but I do feel like once the European campaign is done and dusted, that's when we have that opportunity to start motoring again, and hopefully that can come to fruition. Which is why I'm not worried about where we currently are. I'm concerned, but I'm not worried to the point where I'm starting to think about trips to away grounds in the Championship next season. I don't think we're quite there yet. But do you have any score predictions you want to offer up for Bruges and perhaps Aberdeen, if you're feeling that way inclined?
Um, for for the Bruges game, I can see it being a score draw. I think both teams will score because it's going to be quite a high intensity game. It'll be pretty end to end. I think I'm anticipating an entertaining match. I'll say two each. I think I'll say 2-2. For Aberdeen, you'll remember that last time out, was worried that we were going to hit that Celtic at exactly the wrong time. The international break came at the wrong time because we had Celtic immediately after. I don't think there's a better time to play Aberdeen because after we've seen it happen so many times where a team will go on a lengthy run for several months of not losing a game. As soon as they lose, that momentum can collapse. They've lost to St Mirren, and then tonight they've drawn 3 each after being in an advantageous position against the bottom team in the division. That's pretty poor for a team that's in the top two. They also have Celtic 3 days after we play them, so there is the possibility on Sunday that Aberdeen do not field a full strength team. They'll probably have an eye on the Celtic game because if they're going to pick up the points they've lost this week, they're going to need to try and beat Celtic. They have to go at Celtic because
Yeah,
Celtic aren't looking like
true.
dropping those points anytime soon anywhere
Yeah,
else. So they really need to have a good long think about which of these games takes priority. And for me, if you're Aberdeen manager Jimmy Thielen, it's the Celtic game. You want
yeah.
your best 11 on against Celtic. So this is the best possible time to play Aberdeen. Hopefully we can get through Cercle Brugge without any injuries. That's my main concern. I just want a fresh squad for the Aberdeen game. Um, I'm going to be optimistic, and I'm going to say 2-1 Hearts on Sunday, based mainly on two aspects. One being the Celtic game is 3 days after Hearts and Aberdeen, and also the history of the home side basically owning this tie in recent years. It's just
Yeah.
bizarre how heavily that has skewed toward home sides. So I'm going to say 2-1 Hearts in that game with Musa goal, and I'm going to say Musa and Spit will score.
That's sensible. That's sensible. I think, and again, this will not surprise you or anybody else. I believe as well that we will get a draw against Bruges.
Yeah,
But equally, it wouldn't shock me if we came away empty-handed. But I don't see us winning the game, unfortunately. As much, I mean, I'd love to be wrong. I said it about
yeah,
Heidenheim. I didn't think we'd win, and we played well enough to win that game and ended up losing it. But I feel a draw is a reasonable return for the Brugge tie. Aberdeen on Sunday, huge game, very very important game. I'm going to put my confident hat on. I'm going to put my optimistic. Let's see if we can get a result, and like you say, turn the ship around and get us moving in the right direction. I'm going to go for a 2-0. Don't ask me where I'm getting the nil from. I just feel like Craig Gordon is
I'll tell
is
you where you're getting the nil from. Craig Gordon's golden mitts. That's where. He was excellent in Saturday night. I have to repeat that. I feel like he's not getting enough credit for some of the stops he did make, because even on the goals, the third, Ida's first one, he almost managed to turn it around the post from like a yard out, and he had been left basically deserted by his defence by that point. I felt bad for him because he was excellent again.
Oh yeah, he's always excellent. He's Craig Gordon. Come on. Anyway, before we go down that tangent, you and I can we can talk privately about Craig Gordon, because we do on a regular basis. Because the man is a phenomenon. But yeah, hopefully
since I was young after dark, we would just sit and slobber over Craig Gordon all night.
God. On that note,
I think Craig Gordon.
I wish I was.
Yeah.
God. On that note, folks, I'm gonna wrap the this week's episode up on that note. On that rather disturbing note. My mind's wandering now, John. What have you done to me? But if you are one of the many thousands of fans that have made the way across to Bruges, please enjoy yourselves, and hopefully you can bring back a positive result to hopefully see us gather some momentum on Sunday against Aberdeen. But yes, as I said at the start, folks, please do consider subscribing to the YouTube channel if you've enjoyed the content that we've been putting out recently. It's massively appreciated, and as is your feedback. So hopefully, if you feel that way inclined, you can head down to the description and hit subscribe for us. That'd be amazing. Find our socials down there: Blue Sky, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all the ones that, they're all down there. So follow us, find us, like us, do all the things that you do on social medias. But anyway, aside from that, I will leave it there for this evening. Thank you as ever to John for joining me this evening for our weekly rant on all things Heart of Midlothian. The pleasure was all mine, my friend, and even that ending about Craig Gordon has got me feeling some kind of way. So I'm going to leave it there and take it easy. Cheerio for now.